month's how-to video, I thought I would talk about how to paint wildflowers. And so I thought, since this particular illustration, this is the 15th illustration, will be focusing on some coneflowers and some harebells, I thought I would teach you how I go about painting those two types of flowers. As you can see, I've already kind of started on this side. I have the coneflowers and I have the beginnings of the harebells. I am going to be focusing with you on filling in this side so that I can show you some of my techniques. We're going to start with the coneflowers. And so to begin with, I'm going to be using this cadmium yellow deep hue, burnt sienna, and titanium white. So I'm going to load up my palette with that. You're welcome to join me if you are planning on painting along. So as you can see, I've already painted in my grass blades here and the trail. So what I'm going to be doing now is just focusing in on laying the flowers in on top of the grass. So you can see the petals, and then I'll go back and paint some of the grass blades over the top to kind of cover those. Brushes that you might want to use for painting the flowers include a filbert brush, which I use a lot. This is a smaller one, it's a size 2. And then I use some detail brushes, some little round brushes. I have a shorter tip and then I have a longer tip too in case I want to switch. Okay, so zooming in just a little bit more on the side that we're going to be working on, I'm going to be starting to paint my petals with my filbert brush. And so I'm going to come in and I'm going to be starting as I'm closer to the foreground here, to the part of the painting that's kind of lower, but it's also going to be kind of closer to you as the viewer. My flowers are going to be bigger, and then as I start to recede into the background, they'll get a little bit smaller. So because I have green already on here, when I go to paint my flower petals, I'm going to be using white to begin with. When that's dry, I'm going to go back over it with some yellow. You can also mix, but you'll still probably want to go back with the yellow to get kind of darker petals. So this will make it easy for you to see. But what I'm doing is starting out, instead of painting flat where I'll get a wider stroke, I'm turning my brush to the side to get that tip as I paint. And then I'm going to come back in and fill in that petal. So that's kind of the petal shape that we're wanting for the coneflower. And it might change as you go a little bit. But I kind of start with one petal and then work my way around, depending on which direction you happen to have your coneflower facing. Most of the time flowers grow headed towards wherever the sunlight is. So I kind of am trying to point them all together, but every once in a while you'll see flowers pointing the other direction as well. So I do kind of change it up a little bit. Okay, so I've added some petals around. I'm going to have the center of the flower right here, so I'm painting kind of around that. So I'm going to go ahead and speed things up. I'll add some more coneflowers in here, and then we'll come back and add the yellow. All right, I went ahead and added the yellow over the top of the white. In a few areas, I gave it a third coating of paint, so 2 coatings of the yellow just to make it a little bit brighter. One of the last steps for the coneflowers is to paint the centers, and so for that, I'm going to use one of my smaller brushes, and then I'm going to be using the burnt sienna and the white. The white I'm going to use sparingly, and you can kind of see on here, I kind of just use it for little dabs of light in there. So if I'm going about painting one of these centers, I'm going to start by painting the arc to show where the cone is, and then I'm going to fill in. And then I'll dip my brush in just a tiny bit of white and add a few specks of white in there. And if it's too much, you can always come back and add a little bit more of the brown. So I'll go ahead and speed things up for that. Okay, my last step for the cone flowers is going to be to ink in the outlines. And in order for me to do that, they're going to have to dry really well. So I'm going to go ahead and let those dry while I work on the harebells. Now the harebells are kind of like upside down bells or buckets. And they have little kind of pointy edges to them. So in order to paint those, I'm going to need kind of a bluish purple, and so I use this light blue violet color. You can also mix your own if you'd like to. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using just this light blue violet color and the white. And what I'm going to do, they're going to be a smaller flower than the cone flower. So let me see. Bear with me here while I kind of zoom in a little bit. So what I'm going to do to start with is I'm going to paint kind of an upside down U. And I do use reference photos. Unfortunately, they're usually on my phone, which happens to be what I use for my camera for filming this. So I can't show you them right now, but I do use reference photos just so I can look at what a harebell would look like. So I'm doing an upside down U and then kind of giving it a little bit of a zigzag jagged edge on there. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip my white, my brush in white, and mix it with a little bit of the lighter color, and hopefully you can see here. But what I'm doing is just a little ways in, I'm painting kind of that same shape, but inside. And when I actually outline it, you'll be able to see it a little bit better, how it'll kind of make that look a little more three-dimensional. Harebells tend to grow together, kind of in more of a stalk shape. So I am going to add little clusters of harebells. Again, starting with the U shape, flaring out a little bit on the sides, and giving it that jagged edge. Then coming back with some white dipped in that. And what I'm going to do for that part in there is I'm going to show kind of where the opening would be. And again, if you use reference photos, I think it'll really help you to be able to see kind of how those shapes work. And if you need to, you can always draw with the pencil first if you need to be able to see those shapes a little bit better. So I'm going to keep doing that and fill up the whole meadow on this side with those harebell shapes. Okay, my last step is going to be to ink in the outlines of my flowers. And then I also need to paint and draw stems in there, which I'll do probably for the harebells. I'll use a little bit of my ink, probably this smaller tip, this 005. And then for my cone flowers, I'll probably paint in the stems with the green. So I'm going to show you the inking, and then what I'll do is I will post a photo of this meadow when it is complete. Okay, so for the cone flowers, I'm going to use a 03. And what I usually do is I start out by inking in the line around the center. And then I'll come in, and I kind of want the petals to overlap in there a little bit. But I will go back through and I'll start to ink in the petals. Now, if your petal, the painting, wasn't exactly where you wanted it, ink in where you want that line to be. And you can always, if you don't like that edge kind of hanging over, you can always go back in with some of your green and just touch it up at the end. And I'm leaving the point there. My harebells that I painted on the other side are still a little wet, so I'm just going to demonstrate with the ones that are on this side here so you can kind of see what those look like when they're done. So I kind of did the same thing here for the shape. So I'm going to outline where that is so you can kind of see. Okay, so that one's kind of facing in a funny direction. This one, you'll get a little more of the traditional shape in there. And then I'll do a couple of these little ones so you can kind of see. And this will have more of the shape that we kind of had going there. So it'll be a little more of a cup shape to it. Okay, and then what I'm gonna do is with my smaller tip, I'm gonna go through and add some lines. Just to give it a little more texture in there. Okay. And harebells kind of grow hanging down a little bit. And so when you actually do the stems coming down, they'll be a little more bent. And I don't know if you can see that very well in the video, but they'll be a little bit more kind of hanging down, rounded, almost like a candy cane shape kind of. So I'll draw those in for demonstration. And so that, my dear friends, is my approach to harebells and to the cone flowers that I include in a lot of my illustrations for the book. So that is this month's how-to. Next month I'm going to be doing a painting. I haven't decided yet, but probably with a jackalope in it. Haven't decided if I want to go into that realm, but I'm thinking a jackalope, so I might do a how to draw a jackalope video just for fun. But if not, I'll pick something fun. So thank you for tuning in.